Okay.
Hi again! Okay. Ignore the half-finished Red Bull. Okay. Beep bop boop bop. Okay, hi. Let me get set back up. Okay. We left off at like things that you can do year round that take a little bit of effort on your part. So the first is maintaining a social media presence. This is a thing that teams should be doing anyway, and something that I feel like I don't need to explain the other virtues of. Like, people know that having a social media presence is good for gathering sponsors, yada yada yada. But it also becomes really useful when you need to get messages or information out to your greater school community. When this slide came before things that you should do in preseason, this was a good way for me to preface the thing about all of, like, literally every maiden and every cyborg reposting that thing on their Instagram stories, because, like, team social media presence good. It's very simple. Like, if you did not know we had an interest meeting, by the time that Instagram post went out and went up on everyone's stories, you knew then. Another way to get announcements out beyond your team is to make use of your school's existing infrastructure for things like that. Again, like the morning announcements, there's like a weekly newsletter for Bronx Science, and students don't read that, but I know that parents do. And if you broadcast on channels that parents look at, there will be parents that see it and talk to their kid and go like, you should do this. And while, like, parents pressuring their children to do activity is bad, parents telling their kids to do robotics good, because robotics good. You can reach parents through that. Even if you say, like, during the rest of the school year, if you ask them to put on, like, the morning announcements, like, hey, robotics is a competition this weekend. Like, it's a great way to just very casually remind people that you're there, remind people that you do things, even when you're not, like, broadcasting to the whole school, like, join our team, join our team. Especially, like, if you are a team that does not have tryouts or does not have a formal recruitment structure and can take members all year, reminding people that you exist all year because they could join at literally any point in time is super viable. For teams like the Maidens and the Cyborgs that specifically are only taking members in the fall, like, what you do the rest of the year is, well, important, not super important. But if you can take members all the time, you should never stop reminding your student body who you are and what you do. And so getting students from interest to involvement is its own thing, because I think good recruiting, and this is where my notes end, because this is the part where I was like, I can just say this. Good recruiting does not stop when somebody has come to one meeting. Good recruiting is about recruiting members that will stay. I think I say this on this slide, yeah. If you don't have a strict attendance policy, people can just decide that robotics is not for them. People can decide that they are just going to stop doing this, right? And one of the easiest ways to, like, turn someone away is to just keep doing what you normally do and expect them to, like, figure it out and merge themselves into your operations. And this is not to dirt on my Formula SAE team, but, okay, brief sidebar. So there is this competition called Formula SAE. A lot of people do it after doing first in high school. It's a college competition. You build race cars. Now we're up to speed. My Formula SAE team that I'm on now sort of just expected us to integrate ourselves into normal team operations without bringing people up to speed. And I stayed, and a couple other people stayed, because we either already knew enough about engineering to bring ourselves up to speed, or we, like me, had really decided that this was what we were going to do, and so we were going to stick through. But it's really easy for people to just decide that they don't want to do your thing. People have homework, people have other clubs, people have lots of, in their minds, better things to do than first. Again, there are not better things to do than first, but before they're indoctrinated, they don't know that. So you need to give your new members the tools they need to become functioning team members. You need to, like, help them bring themselves into your team, and that's why preseason is so important. So, like, is this, yeah. So, like, you have people at your first meeting. you have this giant pool of people who are like, hey, maybe I want to do this. Like, what do you do with them? What do you need between then and build season to make sure they can be like good functioning members during build? You need to teach them robotics and you need to teach them engineering. Those are two separate things, right? They need to learn about FIRST and they need to learn like how to drill a hole. You can't separate them completely from your veterans because then they won't know your veterans. And then this is what happened when you're in the maidens. I was a project head and they had kept rookie training completely separate from us. And I didn't know any of the rookies that were assigned to me on my mechanism. I didn't know their names for like a couple weeks of build and it was really embarrassing. And it was really bad because I didn't know how to work with them. I didn't know what their strengths were. I didn't know what they had been taught, so I didn't know what I could expect of them. And I ended up trying to do everything myself, which as many of us know from trying to do everything ourselves on a first team, it doesn't work very well. And if you do not have mandatory attendance, if this is a team where people can like come and go as they please, you want the ones that you can't count on to like filter themselves out now, right? You want to figure out who you can rely on and who you can't, because when it gets down to build, you don't want to give somebody a job and then find out that they actually have some other club 3 days a week that they're more committed to than yours. Again, what not to do is just do your normal stuff, keep doing what you're doing, expect them to figure it out. Does not work. I cannot emphasize that enough. Does not work on FIRST, does not work in Formula SAE, does not work in life. You have to train people if you want them to stay. And so, structuring preseason. This is, so tryouts. Tryouts. Why are tryouts sometimes not a terrible thing? So the first thing is you have time for rookies only lessons. Your vets have better things to do than sit through how to drill a hole again. Your vets don't need how to drill a hole. Your vets don't need how to sand. Your vets don't need how to use the chop saw. Your vets know that, right? And so while they're doing that, like while you're teaching your rookies stuff, or while you have your rookies completely cordoned off for tryouts, like your vets can be doing other better things. They can be cleaning the shop, which like always has to happen. They can be preparing for an off season if you have an off season that fall. They can be teaching your new members lessons because that will make them learn it better themselves. And so like what I have here is like you keep your rookies and your vets separate and then you combine them. And so the other nice thing about tryouts is it sets a precedent as people come in that like this is what we do on the team. You are required to come. Like you come to meetings, you are productive during meetings. Like this is the standard that you will be held to on this team. And it starts people off on a foot of understanding that they like have to show a certain level of dedication to be there. Which is a really good thing to do because we like when people are dedicated and show up and all that stuff. Like rookies, to try out for the Iron Maidens or the Cyborgs, you have to want to be there badly enough that you will show up to 5 meetings. And if you can't do that, how can they expect you to show up to build season? Is sort of the rationale behind that to me. And so what this does is, like, I sat down on a whiteboard and I tried to map out, like, meeting by meeting what happens during Maidens preseason. And the answer is this, mostly. So, like, yeah, it's about 25 meetings total, because, like, we meet twice a week. Again, this is, like, you don't have to do this. This is just what happens with us. We have a couple meetings where, like, we say hi to our old members. We say this is what's happening in preseason, and then we just start going. Like, all of your preseason planning, all of your recruiting planning should be done before you get back to school, so that, like I mentioned earlier, you just start. So then you have your interest meeting. Between meeting 1 and your interest meeting, you do all that good stuff like distributing flyers and going to people's homerooms and saying join robotics, join robotics, join robotics, join robotics, until all that plays over and over in their heads is join robotics, join robotics, join robotics. And then they join robotics, and then it's great. Then we have about 5 meetings of tryouts. Again, like this is where you can have your rookies doing something separate from your veterans, so that your rookies are brought up to speed and then can be like merged into the rest of your team at what I named the rookie veteran merge point, which sounds a little pretentious, but like, you know what I mean. It's just where you can have your rookies and veterans move together and like meet each other and start working together. That's why you have a first meeting here where everybody gets to know each other. You don't have to like accomplish anything during this meeting. You don't have to teach anyone anything except like each other's names, basically. You know, it's a fun meeting, it's a hangout meeting. Then you can have a couple meetings where you teach everybody stuff together. If you had weaknesses in the past season that you want everybody to know about and everybody to learn how to fix, like this is a time when you can have everyone together and you can have a mentor or a leadership member just say, hey, lesson about things that you want people to know. This is like, I'll get into this later, but this is what I mean when I say preseason really sets a tone for your new members and for your old members about like, this is what this year is going to be like. This is what's going to be happening this year. And so when you have your rookies and your veterans together receiving a lesson, this is like the first information your rookies receiving. This is like how they think your team operates. And then a preseason project is usually the tail end of preseason. I will get to what makes a good preseason project. We'll get there. And then this is like if you don't have tryouts, literally the only difference is that get to know each other meeting is now before, and then you re-separate your rookies and vets, and then you put them back together. When you lose the mandatoriness of tryouts, you do, you hurt a little bit because, again, people can come and go as they please. If they come and go as they please during, like, absolute basic engineering, if they come and go as they please, and again, this is like me talking in terms of, like, the engineering construction department. I'm sure there are analogs for this in programming electronics. I just don't know them. I'm going to pause. What time is it? Very cool. Oh, also, fun Maiden Cyborgs piece of trivia. Christina was watching that stream so she could see me flame Noah. I don't know, does Cyborg know Christina? Oh my goodness. She was on Maiden's Electronics. She was the year older than myself. Okay. Back we go. Where was I? So, like, when people can come and go as they please during the absolute most basic lessons, it becomes really hard to get them involved as you progress from there. And so if you can set a standard of, if you want to be on robotics, you have to go to these meetings, you don't even have to say, like, this is a tryout, and then lie to them and everyone gets on the team anyway. You can just say, if you want to be involved with us, you have to come to these meetings, you have to come to how to drill a hole, you have to come to how to measure a part, or you have to come to, like, basic assemblies. Whatever you have during this period of time, if you can make it mandatory, you're setting a standard for your new members of, like, this is what we do, this is what is expected of you, which really helps get them in the mindset to be really dedicated and involved with your team, or if they're not going to do that, helps them understand, like, this is not for me, and has them filter themselves out before you get to the build season point, and, again, find out that you can't rely on them when maybe you thought you could. So, I believe I have one more thing, and effective preseason projects. So, preseason projects are introducing your new members to engineering, to what we do in first, and to your team and how you do things. So, you really want to make your preseason be like a little microcosm of build, so that, like I said before, you set the tone, you help them understand how the rest of the year is going to look, how the rest of the year is going to shape out for them. This means the task at hand should be representative of what you do in FRC. A training exercise where you ask someone to CAD, like, one, and again, this is all engineering stuff. I'm sure there are analogs in programming electronics. That's just not what I did in my time in first. If you ask someone to CAD, like, one really complicated, really beautifully shaped part, I'm sure that's a cool exercise, but it doesn't necessarily show them, like, what we do in first. That's not how you CAD a mechanism, right? If you don't teach someone how to strategically think through an assembly, or think through, like, how to implement a piston, or things like that, you're not necessarily properly training them for what they're going to come across during build. Structuring is this project as a competition helps make your members feel engaged. I have found this is not like you have to do this. This is just, I mean, going back to my Formula SAE team that I'm on now, our first project, our, like, rookie project, was CADing, like, a wrench to be 3D printed. And you won if it could withstand the most force and be the lightest. And I said, you win? What do you win? And they said, nothing. It's bragging rights. And I said, I'm going to win. And I did. And I sank a lot of time and effort into wanting to win so that I could name my team, Team 2265, and have Team 2265 win the Bulldogs Racing wrench competition. And, like, there will be people like that. There will be people who say, oh, it's a competition, like, I am invested now. And it helps people learn to work with each other if you make it a group project. You say, you mix together rookies and veterans, blah, blah, blah. People like competitions generally. Yes. I'm trying to think, I had more to say in this slide, and it's not in my brain right now, because in my brain right now is that I have a Latin final. But whatever. This is a funny joke that you guys don't get, but this is a good reference to my Bulldogs Racing progress reports. Do we have questions? Do we have comments? We do not. I think I'm done. Yeah. Thank you for coming. Yeah, the end. I don't know why Breck Science people were here. You guys do this already.
Is it good? Are we streaming? It says we're streaming. Oof. Give me a second. Let me check my phone. Huh. No. Okay, the audio works. Oh, here we go. Okay, there's just a little bit of a delay. Okay, I believe we can start. Yeah.
Good afternoon, morning-ish. Uh, this lecture is on the engineering process. I'm Nicholas. I built our climber last year, which it sort of worked, so that was okay. But I'm going to talk about how you'll learn how you can build a climber in this lecture, but you can also learn more about like the broad engineering process through it and like a bit of how to structure your abilities and like some lessons and takeaways that you can go into it with. So we're gonna just like jump right into it, and we can talk about preseason. Every team's preseason is like different, so what I'm saying might not apply to your team, but we can just start off. So when I started making a climber, it was during COVID, and like I practiced with that. I know it looks really ugly and really big. It's also really heavy. That was like my first shot at it, and I was like, okay, we do not have access to any materials. So what can we do with nuts, bolts, and like VersaFrame to like 80-20 to pre-cut length? So that's what we had to start off with. And what preseason did is we took that, which was like utter garbage, and then we just like took it and we were like, okay, this is utter garbage. Why are all our previous designs like bad? Our team has never climbed in any game since 2003, just when we started, up until like last year. So that's an accomplishment. So our preseason goal was kind of just have like a one-stage climber, just figure out like how telescoping worked. We want something cheap because our school doesn't give us much budget for stuff like this. And then we also wanted something like a functional mechanism so we could just practice working. Like every department could learn like how to do the electronics of it, how to program it, and just have that hands-on thing. So as build season came into play, we'd have something there. And in all senses, it failed. But that's okay. Start with the CAD. I did not take a photo of the CAD, and it's somewhere in my computer, that CAD file. I have no clue where it is, so use this Andy Mark one-stage climber as like an image for it. All it was like the basics of a climber. It was basically just like the important parts, like your constant force spring holders, your bearing holders, and stuff like that. And you have your hook, just to figure out like what you needed. And it wasn't meant to be going on a robot or something like that. We just wanted something there. And what this did for us was like, we just learned like, how does a constant force spring work and stuff like that. And another big thing was we had this time crunch because of COVID. Our school's like, oh yeah, you guys start meeting like November or something. It was crazy. So it was just like, how quickly can we finish this CAD so we can get into the shop? Could have been late October, but it was really late. And then, so going into that manufacturer, I also didn't get many photos of this, but don't worry. It took way too long. But that's a good thing in a sense, because everyone, like all our rookies, they learned, how do I like use a drill press? How do I do this? How do I do that? And the good thing about that was, it wasn't something where like, if the hole was like an inch off, it wasn't gonna work, right? And it wasn't something where, if we went into build season with that same mentality, you wouldn't have a functioning climber, which we kind of did this year, so that was good. We 3D printed whatever we could, because a lot of our students are kind of nerds, and they all have 3D printers at home, including myself. So it's something that we could like do, and then if it didn't work, you could print another one, or like you could do it better. And we also learned a few things about 3D printing. We got the main assembly done, Like we kind of like had the basic structure of it and we knew how it was put together. But the big thing we figured out is we had no motivation to do this. We didn't have like a set deadline. We're just like, you know what? I'm gonna come in today, I'm gonna do this. And that was like a real problem for us, where no one really knew what they were doing and no one knew why we were doing it. So it's like, okay, I'm here building this, but I don't feel passionate about it. It's about figuring out how to motivate someone to do that. And another big thing was to figure out, like, set like specific goals. But we didn't set we did not set specific goals for ourselves. And that was a big problem. We didn't like, there was no supervision of it. It was kind of like, this is your own personal project, go have fun. It wasn't like, okay, you need a climber that extends 3 feet in the air and then does this, this, and this in like 3 stages or 1 stage. Let's just have something done. And that kind of like, do whatever you wantness of it, like really just lost focus of what we were trying to do. And then going on to like our reflections. This was the first, like, as far as we got into like the manufacturing of it. You can see that Shake, he's holding up, trying to get like the bolt threaded into place. We did not have a functioning climber by the end of this, because we set goals for ourselves that we weren't able to meet. And then there was no like real expectation. And then we realized a few things though. We realized like, you cannot 3D print your hook, and that won't hold the weight of your robot. We also learned like, 3D printing, it has its uses. And also like, we learned how to properly 3D print. I'm not sure if you guys all know this, but I did going into this season, where it's like, there's a certain way you need to offset a part so it prints the right size, and like, how it will fit into your mechanism. Because it's not as big a problem for other things, but when you're making something that telescopes, those tolerances are really, really tight. And you need to like figure that out. And basically what this preseason did was we didn't get anywhere physically, but we learned a lot of what not to do and what to do. We also learned like the basics of telescoping, how to like use a constant force spring. I cut myself with the constant force springs so many times, and just like figuring out, okay, this is what you do, and that trial and error is like really helpful. This applies to like any mechanism, just figuring out this is how I move it, and this is like the very basics of it. But we did have a few like big takeaways from it. Preseason, guaranteed, as I said, it works very differently for every team. Some teams get like 3 meetings, some teams get like 30. And figuring out like, make expectations reasonable within that limit. You don't want people to be burned out because they're working on their preseason project, and then it's like, you have Christmas break, get denied from every college, and then you go into build season. And then it's like a panic, and then you start burning out. And the big thing is you need to start your planning as soon as possible. Like, it should be like 1 meeting, and then you're in the door with your project, working on a machine for it. Because if you spend like your first 3 weeks of, what am I going to do? That's a wasted time. You're never going to know like how to do something properly. And then you're going to spend that time when you could be like in the shop, or like in your shop, doing things. You're just sitting there like on a whiteboard, like, this is what I do. And that is valuable, but it's something that can be done outside of school. And for our team, our mentors don't really like giving us a lot of time. So that time that we spend in the school is so valuable, and it's about figuring that out. And then another big thing is finding projects, and not talking about like the mechanism, but like even like drill these holes, figure out like how to like spread that workload out, and assess your like rookies' abilities of like, okay, I know Jonathan, he's one of my rookies. I learned he was really good with certain things, but he was also really bad at certain other things, and he knew that too. So when it came to build season, it's like, okay, can I have you do this, but not this? And figuring that out then was crucial. And then also figuring out how you can further train them to do something better. Going on from that, it's a good thing to try and have all your veterans doing something you like, and like something that they're passionate about. This goes back to the motivation that I was talking about previously. If you have like your veterans like all prototyping bumpers, they're all gonna like hate being there, and they're not gonna like care to like, oh yeah, this is how I iron on the fabric. You want to have them doing something that they're like passionate about. But guaranteed, there is that time where it's like, okay, we need to do something in preseason about this, and we need to have this mechanism prototype. Because last year our bumpers fell apart, and now might be the time to change that. And it's something where you need to like, you just have balance between doing something that's important and also having something that your members are gonna like stay passionate about doing. This goes to your rookies as well. Have them do a variety of things. Have something like for them to try out. Don't have them stick to one thing and just spend their days like on the belt sander, like burning their hands because like they're picking up hot ends apart. And then preseason is a great time to be creative. There are a lot more liberties that you'll get in preseason, where no matter what you have isn't going to go on the robot. So it might be a good time if you have the time and the ability to like try something new. For example, like one team did like a vacuum climber where they did like jumped. Not sure if it's like a vacuum. They used a vacuum to climb, and like that might be something that like our teams or your team might not be able to figure out during like build season. But if they have time to practice those mechanisms during like their preseason, it might be good. Guaranteed, you don't know what the game is. But typically there are some aspects of every first game that can be carried over year to year. Like for sometimes it might be like a double climbing mechanism or something like that. You could prototype during your preseason if you have the time and the resources to do that. Then going after preseason, you get that short break, and then suddenly you get to build season. Build season starts with the kickoff. So I know Joe Boy said something very different about this, and he said no like design should be done on your kickoff day, which I agree with him, but our team just needs the liberty of having that Sunday afterwards, and like more days to prototype. So we kind of split our day into two, where it's like first you do the research in that first half of the day, that second half of the day is design and research. This is Noah Alexander Tom Wong. He's been in FRC since like probably the start of time, so 13 or so billion years. And next to him is Joshua Alani. He's a physics teacher who knows nothing, like zero about robotics, but he can still shoot down an idea. He sees some common sense, And sometimes you just need someone to be like, hey, don't you think what you're doing is kind of like far-fetched or like even like stupid at times? And just like to have someone there just to say, okay, maybe you should like consider other ideas and like kind of like be that second hand there. And then another thing is like sometimes your alumni come back. I know a lot of engineering alumni especially, they don't like do things like with their family in their free time. And kickoff is one of those 10 days in like mid-winter break for them that they can come back. And having them there isn't only good for your like relations with your alumni. So when they become like rich or something, they donate money back to your team. But they've been through like 4 years of robotics or 3 years, depending on like when they joined your team. And you can use them to like see, okay, maybe our climber was done in a previous year, and this is how they did that time, and use that information to like understand better, and then understand like your concept there. Do not stick to one idea. This is a big thing. You cannot like take this idea and say, we are climbing to traversal run this way, and this is how it's gonna happen no matter what. Because once you get stuck on that idea, then you go into like later in build season, and you're like, wow, I forgot this one thing about it, and it's not gonna work entirely. You need to like stick to other ideas. You need to be open to new ideas. And I'm not saying don't focus on your idea, but you need to be ready to like try something else or accept something else. And then make sure you like draw everything out, and, like have some sort of visual aid. Whiteboards are really good at this. I'm a really big fan of whiteboards because I can't really think straight sometimes, especially if there's a lot going on. And also what I really like is, if you notice here, we have like a list of like all our stuff that we want to do and make maps. Then you can have people come into your room and just like look around and make ideas and comments on that like board, on that drawing, and like you can take photos of for future reference. And it's really hard just to have everything stuck in your head and like in your head and you can explain it to other people. So if you have all these bullet points down of what you want to do, what your priorities are, that's very helpful. And then also like your mentors, they can't be everywhere at one time. So maybe you can just like have that there and you can do it on your own time. And after build season that one day, you get to like your proof of concepts or prototyping phase 1, whichever you want to call it. Everything you do basically must be prototyped. I need to figure out like every single part of your mechanism, how it's going to work. I'm not saying you have to have a full mechanism or anything along that sort, right? But you need to have something that shows that every single function of it there works. And prototyping in your preseason, stuff like that, does wonders. Like when we had our climber, as I was saying, when we were prototyping that in preseason, we learned a lot of things that we would have learned like in this first week, but like weeks before. And prototyping should be quick and simple. Once again, another thing that I don't have any photos of because we did a really bad job of photographing things. Like this is team 6238 from Rapid React. They had a cardboard box to symbolize their intake, and they used wheels there. And it's not about having that like perfect like design and measurements and everything like ready. It's something quick, simple, and effective that can like show the basics of your design. No matter what, whatever's here isn't going to be going on your robot anyway. So if it's made of cardboard, plywood, it's so much better, and then you can like use that to build off it. It doesn't even have to look like your mechanism. It can be like extremely blown up just so you can test like one function of it. Another thing is like use your mentors and alumni again, especially in this stage, where like once they see something, they can point out flaws with it and like learn from there. And most of them, I know, get that whole week, that first week of build season off. So if you can have them come in as much as they can just go look around and like see what's going on. And also they can like interact with your rookies too, teach them a bit of what's going on if you're overwhelmed. And then once you finish this, assuming everything goes well, and you take all your notes of what's not going to work and what's going to work, you can go into CAD. This man right here, this is Daniel Chen. He's like my personal friend. He loves CAD so much. He was uploading stuff to GradCAD during physics class every single day. And it was really crazy. But your CAD should like basically factor in everything that you're going to do. When I say including bolts, I mean like if they're crucial. Like for our climber, we realized that there needs to be bolts to hold things together, and that might interfere with something. It's not, with CAD, it's not something you'd be like, oh, it'll probably be fine, because that's going to like bite you later. And when you say, oh yeah, I don't need to CAD this, I can just figure it out later, it doesn't work out. And once you have it on paper again, you can like look at it and be like, oh, that bolt is sticking through that box tubing, it shouldn't be doing that. Or like, the geometry for this doesn't work. Going on to geometry, you should have sketches that include all your geometry. What that means is some people call it a reference sketch. Some people call it like reference geometry. There should be like a sketch. It's like one plane of your mechanism. For like the climber, you'd use like the vertical plane, which is like all the basics of your geometry in there. Like each piece of box tubing, how they mesh together, your constant force spring holders, all that stuff, your hook. You should have one sketch with all of that, and then you build off that. Because once you do that, you like the rest of the CADing process is really simple, and you have everything there. Once again, this CAD isn't final, but hopefully it is. So if everything goes right with your mechanism, it should be ready like to put on your robot once you finish this CAD. So you should include like testing infrastructure and how you're going to mount it for the robot. Because ultimately, once you're CADing, maybe your mechanism is done like 2 weeks before everyone else's, or 2 weeks after. So you should include like hardware to like mount it individually to test it like that. So for example, this mechanism here is a small plywood board and like some like 3D printed holders for head shaft. So you could like just test it on its own under weight. Sadly, for some reason we couldn't find the proper parts to make this like prototyping thing during our preseason, like due to the lack of motors or something. And we weren't actually able to test it like without using a drill. And we didn't even have like a proper like socket to put a head shaft into a drill. So we were like using like a 2-inch drill or like half-inch drill bit, and we would just wind our like wire spool around or our rope spool around that. So, but if you're able to include like testing infrastructure into your CAD, that would be very useful. Especially for like electronics, when they're like, how do I wire this? You can just send them a photo, and then we don't have to talk to people. Going on from CAD, once you're finished CADing, you should work on prototyping phase 2. This is the only photo of me in this lecture that you'll see of just me by myself, because it's just a pure struggle of like assembling everything and what we learned. Everything here should be properly made. You should assume like, in theory, everything that you do here could go onto your robot if necessary. And this is a really important time to test things for durability. If you want, throw your mechanism down a flight of stairs. I know that sounds like crazy, but if you're going off the traversal rung and you fall off, it's a good time to be like, hey, this isn't going to be durable enough. And just figure that out now. And typically, when you're testing for durability, you should test for the 125 pounds of your robot. You should do like maybe double or even like 1.5 times that. Where it's like instead of hanging yourself or like hanging 125 pounds from your robot, we had an old captain, who was John. He was like slightly more than that. And we had him just like hug our like climber mechanism off the traversal rung for a while. And there are also photos of like, we left our climber overnight, for I think like 2 or 3 days, just hanging from the traversal rung with like a bunch of weight strapped to it to see how much like the bolts would degrade over that time. You need to test, like you want to break it. You don't want to not break it because it's your baby. Because if it doesn't break now, it's going to break in competition. So you need to test as thoroughly as possible. And then another thing is things aren't going to work. There's always going to be that one thing that like you mess up on, and you need to like you can't be miserable about that, and you can't like drag you down. You need to be there and you need to fix it now, and not like don't be like sad that it doesn't work. After that, you need to like keep a notebook of everything you want, like to like implement into your CAD and all the mistakes you made, and then you can use that and use it later to implement it into your CAD. There have been days when I was building this thing where I had changes and like I needed to make changes to our design. I never did. So the next day I repeated the same thing and it broke the same way because I didn't keep a log of everything because I was so stressed out, and I just like you waste days if you do that. You also learn like sometimes you need to create better fixes to things. When you're prototyping, sometimes you'll realize my hand cannot physically like screw this bolt on because a lot of times it's hard to like account for that in CAD. And when you're so absorbed and zoomed into everything, you don't realize this does not fit together. But now is a good time to figure that out. Also, fun side note, or fun-ish, I guess. When we originally made this, we did not realize that like lithium grease was something that you needed to make your climber go up and down with the tolerances. So we originally like put it together and it wasn't moving. And then one of our Mr. Lonnie, as I said going back, he's like, "Do you put any grease on it?" And we were like, "No, why would you need that? It should fit perfectly. There are bearings on it." And he's like, "Try putting some grease on it, then see what happens." So we accidentally used way too much lithium grease. I got like a bunch of stains all over my shirt when it like retracted and extended for the first time. Big mess all over the hallway. Whenever we did it again, we had to do it in a trash can so that like it wouldn't spray everywhere. It still did anyway. But like it's one of those times where it's like, okay, this is the first time you're seeing your full design in its entirety, and there are going to be mistakes with it, and sometimes there needs to be a quick way to fix it. And you should really like reach out like, "Hey, why isn't this working?" Because sometimes you won't even like notice the obvious flaw in it, and someone else will. But since you were like so absorbed in like, "This is perfect. I CAD'd this for 6 hours. I missed all my math assignments. There's no reason this shouldn't work." And then someone's like, "Oh, you're stupid. You didn't tighten this bolt." And you figure that out through someone else looking at it and having this peer review system. But once you're done with prototyping phase 2, and you've made all those changes that you need to change, in theory, you should be ready to make a mechanism for your robot. Or no, oops, other way around. Mounting your final mechanism. These two people here, this is Jonathan, this is Milena. They're both really short and have really small hands. And this is the only way our climber fit on our robot. Because I did not take into account that you need to actually fit like a rivet gun into something, or you need to like attach chain somehow. And the problem with this was, if you don't take into account like electronics and that there's going to be a bunch of wires in your way, or that like the battery box is like right behind you, you're going to end up like missing everything, and you're going to be like so panicked. You're be like, "What do I do?" And that's a really big problem. But once you like, and this is something where it also goes back to the CAD. When you're mounting your robot, when you're mounting your mechanism to your robot on the CAD, you should figure out like, can my hand fit here? And then you need to have everything ready for mounting. At this point in your season, your robot should probably, especially with the climber, there's a good chance that your robot can function without your mechanism. And like, programming is gonna hate you if you're sitting there like with your robot like, "Oh, I forgot all these bolts, I need to go grab them," and spend a whole meeting just like doing this like tomfoolery, I guess, like looking for everything, looking for bolts, looking for screwdrivers. You should have that all ready. And then sometimes when you're like making your mechanism, don't use rivets. Our team loves using rivets because it's like easier. But once you like, you should not think that it's like completely final. You might need to take your mechanism off and like make changes to it or make edits to it. So make sure that when you mount something, it's not permanent, and think about like, can I take it off later? Can I make repairs to this in the future? And that's something that also goes back into your CAD. So going on from this, we have testing. Testing can be done on your robot, and it can be done like without the rest of your robot. Sadly, we did not test until our first regional, which anyone here could figure out why that might be a problem. Or we didn't have a full-time test. You can test your mechanism's parts independently. I know we tested our hook many times independently, but you need to test everything. We figured out at our first regional, midway through the qualification matches, that the reason our climber was breaking was because of the rope that it had on it. And that rope was Amazon Kevlar. I've been mocked for like, it's been like the past like months now, where I cannot get over the fact that we just bought random Kevlar at Amazon and just keep on breaking because it didn't have the strength. And the reason we thought it wasn't the Kevlar is because the previous ways we had tested our mechanism was using a drill. And we're like, okay, maybe the fact that we were spooling our rope onto a sharp drill is why the Kevlar is breaking. It should be fine. It should be fine is not the solution to everything. And it's not the solution to anything for that matter. But to make sure that like before you go to your first regional, it should be able to work. And then another thing is take videos of your tests. I also made the mistake. I took videos of all of our testing things, and I had no foresight to think, maybe I should keep these videos on my phone, and now you won't be able to see any of them. But you should keep videos, slow motion especially, so you can figure out like where your thing broke, something like that. That's like really useful. And again, this is a great time to test for like repairability, how easy it is to access something, how many of these spare parts do you need, especially for our 3D printed parts, because we couldn't like CNC like custom parts due to like some issues. Aside from that, you need to like have things ready. Like this is what's most likely going to break on our robot. I should print out extra of these. I should have these, and just like figure that out when testing, because it might be too late for you to like fix this, and you might know after 10 matches this ball needs to be tightened. Is it easy to do this? And figure out like can you make what would be called like pocket holes, so it's easier to access the bolt or something like that. Going back from that, competitions. This is like the time where like all the weeks, 6, 8, 10 weeks of your robot, it needs to shine now. So it's a good time where you need to prepare for your competitions and like be ready for it. You should have all your spare parts ready. We had a bunch of, I know this is gonna sound bad, we had a bunch of Vex boxes, and we just filled, every mechanism had a box in the pit of the most common things that would break on their mechanism. And the boxes didn't fit everything, because a lot of things broke. Have those parts ready. And like, so you can be like, okay, your robot's on the field, it breaks, you see it break, you run back to your pit, you find that box, you leave it out. You can also set aside tools for your mechanism. If you have specific tools for your mechanism that are like rare or something like that, like 25 chain, like 10 shears or something like that, you could set that aside in your box. Or if you have like a common thing, like a certain wrench that you use, you have like a piece of tape to it. Like if you have like red tape or something, you can be like, this is for the climber, or you use this. So you can literally just like pick all that stuff up and you have like a quick to go kit. It's almost like you're like an F1 pit crew at this time, because there's so little time between your matches, you're willing to be ready. And on that note, you need to not try and do everything. It can be really hard for some people to leave their mechanism in the hands of someone else. And like, you're like, okay, you do this, if it breaks, it's your problem. But sometimes you are not the best person for the job. And you need to leave your ego aside and be like, okay, I cannot work with this because someone else is better at doing this than me. So it's time where you're like, okay, for the sake of our robot and it competing in the next match, someone else should do this. And then you need to remember that, and the time is of the essence. There's no real time to like slack off or like, oh, it'll be fixed next match. That's not really something you should do. And like keep it in mind that like that time with your robot then is like really important because there's not much time. And you need to have like everything ready even before your robot gets back to the pit, as I was saying. To be like, have people there. Even like, I know we're doing this in Brunswick Eruption. We were waiting 5 minutes because someone was looking for tape and they could not find it. And that is why our bumpers, we weren't able to compete, I believe, in one of the matches, because our bumpers couldn't get back on the robot because we couldn't find a roll of tape. And that time, you need to like have that ready. You need to have systems in place in your pit, especially, of where everything is, and that's it. So you don't spend your time making these careless mistakes. And another thing is, do not take your mechanism off the robot. We almost did this a few times, but whenever you take your mechanism off the robot has to be re-inspected, which we didn't know. So we were about to take our climber off, and then, thank God, Noah Alexander Tom Wong, as I was saying, it's like, don't do that. you have to get your robot re-inspected. So you should work and plan for like, okay, if the chain fails, I will hook the climber down with the bungee cord, and we'll go to our next match like that. Because if you take it off, you're not able to compete again. And you should have that ready in case it breaks to be able to have a legal robot. And then another big thing is keep a cool head. If you're sitting there and you're like, I know I did this at like New York City Regional. I needed something cut, and I wasn't able to like use a saw properly to cut it. And I stepped aside and I was like, okay, I am not in the right state of mind to be doing this right now. I should step aside, let someone else do this. This goes back to don't try and do everything. You have to keep a cool head and like do your best. Like remember that this is a robotics competition. Just like don't lose your mind over the simplest things. And like if a bolt strips, it strips. It's okay. It all happens. Keep a cool head. If you need to step outside and have someone else like take your place, get a glass of water, something like that. That is like one thing that you shouldn't be like shouldn't frown upon. It's okay if you like lose your cool for a second and step out and recognize that fact. But if you're sitting there, like we had one of our programmers, he burnt another. They were soldering battery lugs like on the robot car, and they were like holding it with their hands, and somehow someone got like a bunch of solder on their leg, and like just because everyone was like so panicked, it was like if this battery lug doesn't get on our like robot, it's not gonna happen. And then when we looked in like our pit box later, we had like pre-soldered battery lugs, and it was all fine, and just someone got burnt for nothing. And that like it wastes time for everyone. And like if you do this thing where you're like constantly like, oh, I need to do this, I need to like have this done, this needs to be done, and you don't like you're not thinking properly, and you don't like step aside and take a break. Like, what is the most effective way to do this? Your robot's not going to compete because you're just going to be sitting there like maniacally like taking apart things, putting things back together because you're not keeping a cool head and you're not thinking. Which again, that could go against the timeless of the essence part. You need to like have a balance in your head of, okay, am I being too quick? Am I being efficient about this, or am I being hasty? Because you'll see a lot of times in your pit, people are like doing things maniacally, and because competition does that to people, where someone's like taking apart things because they're like, our robot won't work without this, and sometimes it came to the point where one of our old members had to scream at another member because he would not get his hands off the robot because he thought things were broken on the robot that weren't broken on the robot, and he thought he was the only one that could fix things. And that's a problem to go into. Like, you're not only hurting yourself, you're hurting the whole team by doing that. And this goes into another point I saw on the slides, and it's kind of like a tangent of mine because I was safety captain for a while. Everyone wants to be in your robot's pit. 5 people typically need to be in your robot's pit. There do not need to be more than 5. As soon as you have a bunch of people in there trying to do a bunch of things, everything gets less productive. And then you have people like fighting over things, fighting each other for space next to the robot. And if you don't like have a system in place and you don't have someone just there to be like, you need to step outside, do you need a glass of water, something like that, you're gonna like have inefficiency and you're gonna have problems. So going off from this, we just have some takeaways in the Q&A. So if you weren't paying attention, if you fell asleep for this whole lecture, that's fine. With these takeaways, maybe it should capture everything. The main thing that you need to do in like to have a successful engineering thing, or build a successful mechanism, or don't, is A, find a climber in the box. It's so much more effective. B, just like hold yourself accountable for things, set deadlines, be proper about things, and plan everything out. If you don't set aside time to think things through, then you're gonna start doing things and like just like, hold on, let me get my bearings. Let me set aside some time to think about what I'm gonna say. If you do not take the time to think things through, then you suddenly go into this spiral of like lack of communication, like lack of like effective like allocation of your members. And if you don't have like a meeting before like we've implemented like every veteran on our team keeps a log of what they did today and like what they plan to do. And using those logs and like having people like recap what they did and like think, what am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing today? What is the long-term plan? And using that, your team is going to work most efficiently. And just using all your time outside of school thinking about what you're going to be doing as soon as you get to that like 2-hour-long stretch during your day where you do robotics. Figure out how you can use that time most effectively. And like when you don't realize it until like it passes you. That time that you had in that like few hours that you spent like getting food, thinking about what you're going to do today, is ineffectively used. But also another big thing is just like set realistic expectations for yourself. Maybe you don't need to climb to traversal. Maybe just figure out how to get mid-rung and just like figure that out. So you're not shooting for like, if you shoot for the moon and then you don't reach it, you're gonna feel like awfully upset. But then you realize if we just like did half of what we were gonna do, if we said, no, we won't go to traversal and we will have a robot that climbs to mid, that has a hopper that works, that would be really useful because it's not always that you just do everything and do everything poorly. You're better off doing like the things that you need to do to score points well. And now I will open up the floor to questions, if there are any, about the engineering. Go ahead. Yeah.
The first thing of what you said was, what was it?
Accountability and set like proper expectations and make sure you're meeting them. Any other questions? If not, I believe this lecture is over, and I think it's on time, so that's good. Thank you all so much for coming. Oh, I'm sorry, one last thing. I am by no means saying this is how you should run your FRC team. I am saying these are the reflections we've learned, and you can implement some of this, you can implement all of it, but we think that this is like, basically from what we've seen in our previous years, this is like what you could be doing to make your season more effective.
Wait, actually, I have a question.
Go ahead.
What's preseason?
Preseason is the time before kickoff, where it can be held off season too, between your first day of school or whenever you start meeting for robotics and that kickoff day.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have that.
Okay. You should speak about getting that then, because preseason is a very important time to like train all your rookies and stuff.
Right. I think we got another 20 minutes to go.
I've got another 20. You have another 20 minutes to do whatever you want before the next lecture.
Free to go.
Yeah. That's it then. Thank you.
So you're saying you wanted to climb our box?
Oh, we did not.
You did not.
We should have.
Well, the question I have is do you think you learned more by trying to figure it out without using something that's already canned?
I feel like we did learn more, but when we learned more on how to climb, and then we didn't have a hopper that worked, we kind of have that trade-off of, okay, I did one thing, but now the core functionality of my robot is gone.
So you spent a lot of resources inventing the wheel.
It was mainly the time. Our team gets 80 hours of build season, which may sound like a lot, but compared to other teams, we get like 120 or 106. If you build the map out, you can figure it out, but you get like too little time to do everything well.
When do you meet?
Mondays through Fridays except for Thursdays, 4 to 6. Or 3:45 to 6, but our advisors come late, so we can't make it open till 4. You did good. No, wait. This is all my stuff. No. She goes on to here?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I thought this would
I feel so bad. I'm not going to read any of it.
it was good stuff.
Oh, it's not a venture.
No, invention. It's not really about robotics. I'm not going to show you. I wish I brought my notes. But I guess I can just show you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Give you some advice. So basically, it's 5 minutes.
Oh.
I'm trying to. And I had 2 versions of it. So one version was simply a rope that would have hooks on it. It's a lot like you have a very simple version that would have hooks on it. And then if you were to throw it, it's say there's a bar, you throw it across the bar, the hooks let you pass each other